So, just hi everyone. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I was just going to the bathroom. I'm sure
you're going to come on that first in and
I know it's all just like deliberate kind of. Sorry, it wasn't at all. But George, how long do we have now?
We have an hour and 20.
What?
And then at 4,
Yeah.
Carolina, well, we have until 4. And Carolina will run a micro commission for half an hour to close the event.
Right. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to bring everything together at this point. Imagine this is a round table rather than a rectangular table. And we're a bit like King Arthur, Queen, what was she called? But I think how I'd like to start is, because you've all been so intensively working in your groups for the last half an hour or more, to get some feedback on those groups. How would we like to do it? Do you want to, maybe the facilitator of each group could summarise? We'll start with you, John.
So, my question, which I was working hard to make different to Christina's question, not always succeeding, was what would be some really specific examples, no matter how impractical, of collaborations between Wales and Brazil? So people from Brighton and Bristol had to become Welsh. So here's Brazil-Wales possibilities in the middle here. And there's loads, so it would take too long probably to describe them all. But we started in the middle maybe with the things that are similar or interestingly different. So we had huge and small, the fact that there are 20 million people in Sao Paulo and 3 million people in the whole of Wales. We had obviously things about singing came up quite quickly, and places in between the cities, the places that are depopulated and what happens in those places in between. And then we started thinking of some fairly specific projects. There was a National Costume Beach Volleyball Festival where people played beach volleyball in their national costumes. There was a project looking at, obviously mining is a link between the two countries. So Jardim in particular had a miners project linking South Wales Valleys maybe and Minas Gerais. There was, we looked at some specific projects that people were doing. So Abdul's been working on Assembly Project, which is this voting where a debate performance would happen, and that is something that actually could happen in a different country. We looked at, I inevitably tried to push the conversation towards site-specific theatre, and looking at, could you have dual site-specific theatre or exchange between artists. We looked at what are the other languages, so the idea that Welsh is a relatively thriving language, but what are the other languages in Brazil actually, what are the indigenous languages that are maybe being lost or struggling. Some more specific ideas were, looking at Seskies as a model that we can learn from as cultural centres, but maybe a little bit less precious about what culture is, that allow, swimming pools and things like that to be in the centre, and that are quite thriving as places where artists and residents, etc., and that maybe our centres could benefit from that. Right, it was funny. Also we talked about funding possibilities, the fact that there are very different funding models in Brazil, and maybe there's something also about two countries that have quite strong socialist histories in terms of, so not looking at the usual thing about funding models, how you raise money from businesses, but actually looking at how social models around funding work. Village to village matches, cosmetics, Brazilian cosmetic surgery and Welsh fake tans. Discuss.
I love it.
Is there an online collaboration between young people? Is there a political, this was a socialist thing again, is there a political, artistical, anarchical version of Carnival? I think those are probably, they're the highlights that I've noticed this moment. Road trips. the BR116 and the A470, and the fact that Brazil is huge and Wales is very small, but given the now quite big network of airports in Brazil, it actually takes the same amount of time to travel from one end of Wales to the other as it does to travel from one end of Brazil to the other. So we'll finish on that.
Right, you didn't mention the climate change.
Oh, great, there's a whole bit over here about
That's funny.
project.
I thought you came up with some really
Yeah, so climate stuff was great, actually, right, it is the best. For we started serious, or we had a serious moment, that was places like Centre for Alternative Technology and communities that are living sustainably in Wales, and Brazil started to look at sustainable technologies. There might be interesting exchanges in there. But then and the fact that whenever the Amazon is discussed, people always say, this month in the Amazon area the size of Wales was the size of Wales.
Absolutely.
But then we looked at some more active and artistic climate collaboration. So we did about a rain swap. So Welsh rain versus Amazon rain, and where we can exchange the two, or a forest swap. The different ways that beacher, we talked about putting projected billboards on different beaches that have sunsets and sunrises from the other places projected onto them. And we also talked a bit about the fact that digital could embed a lot of these projects, but like it has today, where there's a very bodily in the room moments alongside the digital moments, and the two mixing up rather than the sort of old pattern of, there's a digital project over there that people do digitally. But we should think about the ways that the digital can really inform what we're doing. Again, that's probably something actually that the theatre world are quite good at, as is Brazil through the whole Pontus project.
Absolutely. Maybe we can come back to that particular. Thank you, John. That was great. I'm interested to see whether there are echoes of that and something else, but also some different ideas so that we can start to pull out the things that really inspire us. Christine.
Well, it's interesting how much connections. We also spoke more or less on the same issues. We also identified the fact that, of course, I started through different perspectives because I was thinking about should we have art forms as a clear way of connecting two countries, or should we not have it as more cultural connections. But mining was something that again was raised in our group, and I myself organized a seminar linking UK and Brazil in mining, from bringing professionals from Cornwall and to Minas Gerais. So if we are talking about mining, definitely the state of Minas Gerais is immediately the potential partner for discussing mining with Wales, and how much we can also connect this to the landscape scenario and the geographical spread in Brazil, and how this is completely the opposite in Wales. And also we spoke about site-specific and how the rural places can really play a very important way on the creative process among artists. And also, I immediately connected again the state of Minas Gerais because of Inhotim and the amazing green arts area that is, it's a botanical garden new in Brazil with an amazing collection from a private guy. He also belonged to the mining sector. So I'm already thinking about connections. We also spoke about how much agriculture is something strong here, and how much young generations are leaving the country because they don't want to stay and work in the sector, and how much the arts or artists or creative leaders or young entrepreneurs, you name it, can contribute to this local discussion and bring this to Brazil somehow. We also spoke about, size perspectives this week covered. We also spoke about how much street performances and the parades here are very tiny and never ever crowded, and how much in Brazil they are so big, 2 million people at the New Year of Copacabana or Carnival parades, crazy, busy people from the country and from all over Brazil, all over the world. We also spoke about connections on the TV sector, business, creative sector from Rio and Cardiff being true hubs on the television sector, might be ways of connection. Of course, I mean, the beaches and the water
And rivers.
and climate change is something very strong. But again, I tend to think that although we are talking about Brazil, we should perhaps think about concentrating all this melting pot into a state. This is my immediate feeling. And then from that state, we explore other connections in the country. Otherwise, it's too much.
Let's come back to that again, I think, because it's quite a...
Yeah, this is an issue that I think we need to bring to the table. And we also talk about how to measure people's perceptions about both countries here, about Brazil and there, about the UK, and how much this initiative, this roundtable, and the program like Transform can contribute.
Did you talk at all about the online space?
Not really, we didn't. We spoke about very much more, well, the TV was a way of connecting, but it's not, we didn't have an online discussion. And we spoke about clubs as well, and how much beer is a connection.
But the TV idea was very interesting, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
The fact that this is essentially television production.
Yes.
There's a lot of television everywhere in Brazil and production.
Is it a film destination? Is it a film destination as well? It's not a film location.
Somewhat, but it's not huge, but TV is quite big. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's I mean, there are we do have sort of the occasional film location down here and there. But yeah, I think with TV.
They use Pembrokeshire quite a lot.
There was Russell Crowe films a year ago, wasn't there?
It's always very exciting when it happens because it doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
It's always like, oh, okay.
It's generally between beaches and castles.
Something that I didn't raise with my group, the groups, was the fact that, and this is my view, that I think crafts is something very strong in Wales, and it's also strong in Brazil. So again, I would say that crafts, craft is something, handmade work is something that is a connection.
Was there anything else that we...
No, and this connects to the creative economy
Yeah.
from those countries, so that's why I think it's important. TV, craft, and music, so it's all the initiatives in a creative economy platform that could link those countries.
Okay, so I asked people who came by my table to be very selfish about what they expected their relationship to
Selfish
be.
giants.
Selfish giants. Just give them permission, that's it, and then go. And there was a lot of various responses, which is very useful to hear, and some of them to do with some sort of database or a very live meeting place of links and opportunities, and artists especially looking to collaborate across the two countries. Some of which was also about what would you offer, what will you put forward to enable a network to go forward, sort of based on your selfish desire in the best possible way, and what is there anything that in your position you can provide, and that raised other discussions which we can go into later. But in terms of some of the things that were talked about were information or hosting, people who come over and be hosted for collaboration to happen. There was also about offering skills, knowledge, pointing to opportunities, and so on. So we remained, with a short time, remained a bit vague, but there was an understanding that, at least in principle, there was an interest to give and take into this potential future. Another thing I'd like to raise, because it was very interesting, is that, especially with Max and Georgie, is the going back to the first one of it, and the impulse of why we created BR16, the interest in residency, and how our first BR16, which was 5 days long in London, not only happened in our, one of our bases, it's sort of our location as curators as well. We're dealing with the support, the network, the infrastructure of the city, the venues, the routes. So there was something more embedded that we were able to achieve, as well as the length of the festival, which had a feeling of a residency festival, where every artist and participant was invited to take part in everything. And so there was a sort of community building over a number of days and journeys and provocations and discussions, where it was quite a unique sort of offering of a space, of a time and space, as opposed to a setup squeezed in a day, which feels a bit more like a conference, with a bit of commissioning. So it's very interesting to look back at the model of what we started proposing beyond 6 and what it is today. To what extent is there useful or not, and where? And so that was the other thing. There was a lot of interest in us as artists ourselves. This, beyond 6 aside, so it's an interesting point to draw lines and understand how does it go to the city in relation to beyond 6 and how does that develop. And a number of other things, but I saw a very strong interest from a number of people in understanding more of the Brazilian landscape in terms of community engaged work, approaches to making work, process, relationship with funding. And I think it was very interesting. It was raised. You said it in terms of not what funding is available, but what is people's relationship with funded work and the sort of can-do attitude and the flexibility, and how. And I think it's something that maybe to bring up, if it's an interesting area to talk about, which is Georgie and I have been feeling, especially in the last few years, that the amount of opportunity that's being raised has been dictating work in a way that Brazilian artists, I'm talking very generally, I would say Brazilian artists as if I could say that, but in principle, had to struggle with not having funding at all whatsoever, and having to make do, collaborate, host, and invent ways of creative process, and how a number of professional organizations today are able to rely on different funding pots, and how that has shaped their approach and their expectation of work when there is money kind of relationship, right?
I think it's healthy. It's very healthy. For the first time in Brazil, you are really sorry to
No, that's okay.
For the first time you see Brazil trying to prepare a generation of producers or people who are applying for funds in a very professional way, because this is quite new in Brazil. So it's because this new pots of money or new funds applications are available, so either people learn how to apply for these funds or they won't come, which is very good.
So
Okay, let's go back to
Yes.
No, it's okay. It's interesting. I think we're coming at it with slightly different timescales as well. Because I'm only talking about my experience over the last few years with funding in Brazil being creating an atmosphere of fear, actually, and infantilization, in my opinion, where artists aren't allowed to move or rearrange things or ask for extensions or anything because of a worry of upsetting the funders. And so we feel a little bit suffocated by that situation where artists are treated slightly more like children as opposed to grown-ups who can manage their money as well as anybody else. And that's quite problematic.
That's another topic. Just to close, then the other aspect of BR16 that we hope will develop and grow, and that's why Mr. Alistair Elbeck is here with us today, is that, and all of you there online watching us now,
Don't go away.
is that, the ability to question and back in the same way the digital and the bodily in the divide, the sort of middle divide perhaps, where what is transferable, what is extendable, what is, what can you do with 72 audience members in the show that you can't extend to 150, otherwise it turns into something else, perhaps, or what aspect of this quite intense meeting of quite interesting people that we hopefully benefit from have an impact on people who couldn't be here today for a number of reasons, or that are in Brazil and are sort of really hungry to know the kind of stuff we're talking about. So using that channel to grow the potential for what this can be. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So what we have in a way is, in a nutshell, the dovetailing of different things that have come together today. It's a bit of a multiple agenda type of meeting. And the question in my mind before the day started, and still is there some space in the middle of these multiple agendas that we weren't bringing people together in order to try and define, that perhaps can only be defined or refined by bringing people together. So I'm going to throw you all into this task now to actually ask you if you think there is a shared space. Is there some kind of common ground, notwithstanding all these different agendas that are in the room? We've got the theatre-led agenda, we've got the online network agenda, we've got the artist-led agenda, we've got the sort of Wales agenda, we've got the UK-wide agenda, we've certainly got the British Council agenda. We unfortunately don't have as many other agencies here as we somehow need to make this, not just Christina being the only one representing these international priorities. But I think it's quite important to throw this one out really, and we can address in a number of ways, perhaps less abstractly, by asking you all to say what has inspired you most today. What is it that you're thinking, yeah, this has really got me excited, and we're going to go do something about it.
I think it's the potential to explore. I think that's the interesting thing about these opportunities. It's just the opportunity, people from very different cultural backgrounds to meet, have enormous similarities and enormous different opinions on things as well. And just explore, and whether that's theatrical or musical or whatever, it's valid. And because that in itself is a cultural statement. People from two countries coming together and they decide, okay, we're going to do theatre or we're going to do online or whatever, that's valid. So I think everything should be considered and nothing discounted.
So the coming together for you, the day is about exploration, or whatever you've been stimulated to do is about exploration?
Well, for me, I think it's been about seeing what possibilities there are. And I think going back to what we were discussing earlier, for me, I've worked in Wales for 20 years. I know Wales, I think. Maybe that's fairly broad for you as well. Anyway, I think I know Wales. So for me, it's very interesting to see how other countries do things. I think we can learn enormously from the place, and I think you get, without realising it, you can get totally boxed in with the parameters of your own country and your own economic systems. But actually, we're in a position, I think, where the arts will needs to start reinventing itself. And I think it's doing that in fairness artistically, in many different ways. From my perspective, it's not reinventing itself in the way it's managed or it's produced or it's created from the very boring pounds, shillings and pence perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's something I really
really interesting.
Yeah.
Would anyone like to pick up on that, or throw something else in? Because one of the things that I've learned a lot from my visits to Brazil is, so I've worked a lot with people that are working with new media and with recombinant media, like making things out of something else, and models that I recognise from Europe but being sort of applied differently there, or used differently, or something turned into something else. And this whole thing of reinvention actually is really fascinating, because Brazil itself is made up of people from all around the world. People come from Japan, people come from a lot of Jewish people went on boats from Russia and you have this sort of sense that you can reinvent elements and something else comes out of it. But that's ongoing. It's not like a historical.
I think
it's really interesting.
Wales is a country we've been very slow to pick up on the European agenda. It's almost the European agenda, which is that's been rapidly crumbling at the moment. We'd be slow to get involved in that. So maybe we need something like the Olympics of 2016 to make us look at a totally different country to see how it can be done elsewhere and bring those ideas back to our country.
think it was one of the nice things about today, relating to director of Manchester is that actually the artistic interventions have actually been about partly about making us think on a policy and organisational level. And usually we think of, when we do things like this, we think of the organisational structure being something that is going to be set in plans, and then out of that organisational structure, once it's set, art will be so there will be a thing called the artist rules, which UK and Brazil, where there will be funding for artists to go from Brazil to UK, and from UK to Brazil, and they will think of projects, and then when they come back, they will do the project. And so the structures exist, and they're supposed to produce the art. And both in what we do in microcosm, but also in partly what Andy's saying, what if we did it the other way around, actually? What if the art helped us reinvent the structures, and actually say one of the big things that we could get out of this, actually, what we do need to completely rethink on what was the organising art is a revolution in those models. And that feels maybe like a much greyer project than a beautiful, multicoloured festival piece of work, but actually it might have a uniquely long-term effect.
But I quite think that arts definitely can reinvent the structure, and that's very much what we are trying to. One of the key messages for, I said this morning, was very much this, because if we don't think about new ways of delivering or doing art, we won't be able to make this program. Another thing that I would like to pick is the fact that Brazil is a melting pot. It was created like that, but it's very remote. So it's completely different for a city like London or Europe in general, that you can very easily go to other countries. Although we have Japan, we have Germany, we have people from all over the world, they are staying there. They don't travel that much because it's very fun. So they travel, but it's not that often that you are it's very easy for you guys to travel to other countries here in Europe. You have easy jets, and in Brazil it's really hard. We don't have trains. You either have a car or bus or fly, and flights are very expensive. Just to bring this to the table as well. Although it's a melting pot since the beginning, we are very much related to our specific regions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think, communication
It's
technology.
important to bring this. Yeah. That's why the states are very strong in the specific regions, and that's why I'm talking about locations, because this is very important.
Work doesn't do it, does it?
No, yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because there's so many people in Brazil who are absolutely massive, like Louis, who have been to the end of Fringe and have played in London a couple of times, and are really for the level they're at of their career, are just not known in Europe. That Brazil is so big that they can actually spend their whole time just touring Brazil and still only get into a fraction of it,
Or you have the opposite, that you have relevant artists being invited to play or to perform all over the world, and they don't exist in their countries.
Like DJ Lewis, because he's known in Europe and outside of
Yeah.
Brazil, and then when we brought him to Rio, nobody came. Like what?
So I want to draw this out a little bit further as well, and just see if there's anyone else to talk about what they find most inspiring today. What is it they've been perhaps?
I like to start some gorillas. And
Chico is leaking down.
One thing for me it's very challenging in terms of thinking about how much Transform could contribute on accessing young generations to the arts. Because if they're living in the country, because if they're not living here because of a specific local factors like culture or you name it, how to, or with a program like
I don't
this.
think they're largely in the
country, they're moving the countryside.
Or you try to reinvent the arts, or you're trying artistic intervention, how much in number, you know, and talking about more people connected.
Yeah, the numbers of young people in Wales is very bad. There's not a big belief of young people across the board that has moved, as I think probably is in Brazil, from rural areas into the city.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so any other thoughts?
The fact that Brazil is even aware, or that there's attempts that Brazil and Wales make connections, that's quite nice, and it gives you like, oh, that's quite cool. It's nice little positive things to think about. Yeah. And what might come of those artists, I think that was
Through the artists connecting
yeah,
with each
to
other.
being aware and having,
Yeah, and you sure in Chate and Sakura did a really interesting job there, pushing this whole idea of the process of things in between artists, that space for the artists and viewpoint to come through. And for me as well, this how that then relates to institutions and to agencies. It's usually quite a complex thing to try and bring into some kind of relationship.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
Because we wouldn't really be here if John and I and George hadn't met in Edinburgh. And I think institutions are made up of people and largely are extremely resistant. And actually I think the same sort of relationship with Christian and with Futuro. I tend to stay away from institutions, quite anti and back culture, and but really trying to open up as I mature into thinking, okay, institutions are made up of people, and some of those people, can be quite like-minded. And so this really, for me, is a bit of a project about artists and institutions as well as all these other agendas. And so when we met, and some of the things that John was talking about, I was really moved by what he was saying about longevity and about providing the spaces for artists to develop their work over years, which is something that you just don't hear. And then Cristina is as well taking a huge risk on programming Hotel Deo in Rio, which then kind of paid off, but she really, she put herself on the front line for us, and I think that was something we really appreciated. So that thing of artists seeking out people in organisations that they're on side, it's not a question of us against them, but trying to kind of forge this third community.
So the most inspiring thing for me of the day has been the format and how we have built things together. So if you sit on your own trying to think of ideas, you can get stuck without realizing you're even stuck. So through conversation and through the series of events of the day, what someone else has said has inevitably led someone else to add on to it. And so we've been building stacks in the day, I think, and hearing different ideas, and I think lots of us in the room, including myself, have been to Brazil. I don't think about Brazil on a daily basis, so it's been really, really nice to think about it all day and talk about it all day and be immersed in the life a little bit and talk to someone who's actually in Brazil now. I think the day's been really lovely in that sense, and I think nailing down ideas, which was one of the last exercises, I guess what we're doing right now, really pinpointing, okay, fine, well, what can actually happen and how can it happen and who can actually happen. I think that's been really productive because you can dream and you can think, but to pinpoint something down in a group setting, I think helps.
Yeah, I congratulate you because I think you pitched it really well actually, because we're very, very different, some senior people here within the arts industry world, artists, people starting out. I think you pitched it really well, so congratulations on that actually.
I was just thinking that we should propose that the advisory group for Transform have a day like that. This would be very
Our fee is not very high.
We should.
What should be on this in the future? Advise the British Council.
Hi all.
You said next time.
We are open for business.
So, any other responses that we can add to this stacking? Really nice metaphor, thank you very much. What else is in that stack? It can be things that maybe could be done differently.
I think what was really interesting for me following on from Carolina was just the potential for dialogues and where that might take place. And some of that comes from the similarities between Wales and Brazil that we've discovered today, the mining or the ruralness or the kind of the villages, and then some of it comes from the contrast, like the mega cities and the travelling from one end of Wales to the other and not in Brazil. So I found that really interesting and where the spaces are between that might be interesting projects. And then again, it was really good to have that session to put down and say, look, so what? You know, what are we going to do? What we can do? What is really good?
Like drawing those lines in between the
Yeah.
segments.
Yeah.
Agree. I'd like to come to that in a moment, but has anyone else got anything they'd like to throw in?
The micro-mission with Felipe and how we were bringing predominantly Brazil and the UK, because most people here either had those moments either happening in Brazil or in the UK, and how that was brought to the room and how we physically crossed over that space with, at the same time that Felipe was remotely crossing over into here. That was really interesting for me to have that.
Yeah, did anyone find the Skype dysfunctions so dysfunctional that it interrupted the exercise?
It was a bit annoying. I found it a bit annoying. I opened my festival with a link into a Skype guy. The guy was in the United States, and it failed all the time. It was the opening of my festival, and I got completely just desperate.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is, isn't it? So
I was a little
I'm getting
desperate
used to
to
that.
it.
I'm getting used to that.
What I've seen people do is FaceTime, because I think the signal is allowed to be less powerful and still work accurately.
The FaceTime is the Facebook.
FaceTime is on an iPhone.
I don't have that.
It's very nice.
Yeah, you
So
know,
you're taking notes.
there are other ways of doing it. I quite enjoyed it, but that one was I just took it up a level of the experimental sound, please. I really like that kind of disruptive sound thing, so it didn't bother. But I think in terms of just thinking about it as a medium and doing these kind of things and maybe other ways of making it better, so I just wanted
I
to...
think what was really smart in it actually, and think about doing such thing in the future, was that you set up a separate feed to feed back to them there, so they could watch our
I like
workshop.
that a lot.
And
Yeah.
that didn't have to happen through the Skype. So I think just in terms of a basic technical thing to have that live streaming without a reason to function.
Okay, so I might just draw a line then on the responses to today. Obviously, there's probably going to be opportunity to be back later, I assume. But what I'd really love to move on to now, it's 3:20, is, okay, what can we do together now? What do we need to make what we thought about maybe doing possible? Because we're sort of, in the invite to today, I talked about the Olympics, talked about the World Cup, talked about all these kind of like broadband horizon things that were driving this context and this opportunity, which interestingly are hardly mentioned today at all. May not even be relevant, may have just been the premise to attract attention to things. But things have been suggested that might even become concrete if you prioritise and what to do them. But what would you need to do to actually make them happen? I'm going to call a new now, John, because I know that on your table you really looked at things that might actually be projects and you wanted to do that. Maybe we throw a few of them out and you say, well, in order to do this, what do we need to do?
I mean, well, that's the diagram of the projects. The more specific the projects are, the more around the edges and we want to take a look at them. Sometimes it's just good to say what sticks in the mind. What I remember most of all, probably, I don't know whether it was one of the last things that I said, was the idea of exchanging grain between two countries. And the way that tied into sustainability, but also land and place, and the intangible bits of the landscape, in part because those are things that we tackle with, or we
projects, the one that you're working on, the Assembly, just sort of hypothetically, what would be needed to happen to make that work in Brazil, to work with it? Because you already gave me the answer.
I think you need to make a decision whether it's going to happen across the whole of Brazil or in a region. So I think we're talking about states, whether it is state by state. I think you need partnerships with local arts organisations to identify communities or individuals within communities who would be useful to kind of generate interest in the project. I think you'd
Did you say that people who would have to vote to do it?
yes, you'd have to talk to people about the voting system and how it works. But we need a version of the website in Portuguese. It is a big question, I guess, but we just duplicate what we have and just translate it, or whether we need to design it. I'm not sure, but just do that. And then time, really. I think it's also we need a bit of time to understand how that would work in that context, in that particular environment. We need a bit of time to just
Who would support that kind of R&D, just functionally here in Wales? Where would funding for that come from?
Probably from most of the websites internationally, they're not huge amounts of money.
I think one of the things about this is normally we get, it's going to be projects throughout the country and it's happening in 6 months' time. We've actually got a really long leading time here on this. And if everything happens in 2016, then great. If it's before then, fine. The periods of actually planning are quite long. I mean, it is a shame there's only 1 council here. It's, that is a bit disappointing. But people like me and John will probably have the opportunity to have a dialogue with the relevant funders, supporters, whatever in Wales to create maybe some form of fund that people on the table or beyond can come up with ideas and then tap into.
Yeah, great.
And then there is supposed to be a British Council Welsh delegation going to this.
There is this possibility, yeah. We need to identify if this delegation would be very much in trouble. Well, is it only for, we don't know yet, and we have to come up with a final list of potential candidates, whether it's people like you running theatre or company, or is it arts councils as well, and what type of individuals we're talking about.
It would be lovely, wouldn't it, if it could be this kind of a mix of people and include, up-and-coming artists as well as, because the conversation just becomes a lot valuable.
I think for the amount of time and energy and work needed to pick a project off the ground and to even start something, practically, I think key people need to be set to work full time on it, and then they can recruit people days or weeks or however long. But for anything to start, I think someone needs to focus on it for a long time. It can't be someone's role to look at. Lots of people can't be working on it part time. If not, it'll just be in the back burner. People need to focus on it fully, I think, depending what the project is, and then bring people in as freelancers in and out.
Yeah. There's almost an assumption there, we just started today, and I think I've gathered over the last few days that there are existing connections with Brazil. It's not like there's nothing there. So one very, very good arts development experience builds on things that have got some roots. So,
can I say something about Anglo-Brazilian projects in the NCC? There was a kind of panic with our negotiations with the guys about how many people could afford to go over, how we could do something that involved like 6 people and a whole lot of kit that actually managed to get on the plane with 2 suitcases. And so I think what I want to say is something about learning to travel light, something I'm really interested in, generally anyway. And then with this particular show, I ended up managing to go into sort of 2 suitcases because we were working with people in Rio and learning to to source things there, so that we're actually kind of through connections through Drift, with people that I met the first time I come to Brazil, and then through working with Lume, and managed to forge connections with young Brazilian artists. So instead of, it was unfortunate for the people that had worked with us in England that they couldn't come to Brazil, but the actual truth of the matter was only the money and the FS for the two key artists. So the other 4 people that actually were in the show in Rio were for Rio-based artists, and actually that's good in itself, So we found Rio
In a way, that's a lovely microcosm of why a network might be really useful to share that knowledge, because I've been involved in maybe 7 projects in Brazil where it's all been artist related or interdisciplinary related, and so I carry the knowledge from those projects and I maybe share them when I know people that are doing similar things. That could be more available. That could be actually, one of the artists that I've worked with, they tried to bring a particular piece of sensor technology from the University of Nottingham to Rio, and it got stopped in customs. And the person at the other end wasn't the university, she was an individual artist called Sylvia Leal, and she started getting all this pressure to go to customs to try and have to negotiate getting this particular piece of, and there was information missing there, obviously, they didn't write the right thing on it, or they didn't do the right thing. So she learned something from that experience, I didn't get the piece of technology back. But there were all these emails flying like, do you know anyone who can advise on this? Who can we ask? That's a case study that could be made available to other people, which goes along with the travelling light. Don't think you're going to get through with
and Victoria and I had about 2-hour conversation about the complexity of running something. I mean, money is one element, right, of the whole thing. But it's absolutely not the only element at all. We're talking about partnerships, we're talking about engaging with local performers and artists, but also, perhaps I would dare say, the most important element is the understanding of what is already embedded and what is going on. I mean, we've just been part of a project that's failed on so many levels, and that's because we've been working with Brazil for 10 years. And it's still failed on so many levels. So, because we were absent from one of the locations, and we had assumed a number of things. And luckily, we're still working with them because it's excellent failure. We still work with them, saying, right, we really know what we don't want to do anymore, and how we're going to prevent that from happening, and how we're going to start yet again on a long term, full of meetings and exchanges and conversations and questions, before we just throw people at it. Or even worse, before we show it as a showcase or a festival or some sort of public. So perhaps there's some things that Victoria might share with us about what is in your head at the moment. And also, you mentioned something else I forgot, but maybe that's...
just kind of the complexities of it, or kind of why.
The reason why is because Ronan was saying what is needed to make those projects happen, and before you went on to who would fund it, I'd like to bring up to the forefront of our minds the complexity of making it happen on a criteria that is about the integrity of the project as well.
Yeah, so when something's strategically driven, when it's like this was Cultural Olympics driven, and the gap between wouldn't it be great to do something making up the UK and Brazil, and the actuality of spending enough time planning it and R&Ding it and field working it and producing it, all those lessons.
I sort of think one of the most important things is making it meaningful for everybody who's involved, and it takes quite a long time to work out where that meaning sits. Looking for potential gaps that other people could offer something to, or the way things could be drawn up in a way that can make something hugely more interesting than it was in the first place. So rather than just thinking, oh, this is how we do it, just go in and do it like that, it's really a case of listening and finding where those points of connection are and building up from that. And it does just take time to do that. because there's so many things to learn about, different histories, politically, culturally, socially, different presents, different perceptions on the same thing. We had a delegation visit from Seafood just a few weeks ago, and we spent about 2 hours just talking about what the definition of a producer is. Because everybody had so many different ideas in their head about what that could be. And in terms of us going forward with a programme to support producers professionally and build a network of people that is actually useful and meaningful into the future, that we have to have that sorted conceptually between the same as that. It's very basic. Because you can assume so much, and I would say assume nothing.
It's kind of what I call the poetics of difference.
Yeah.
That's why we want to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not as clear.
And that's not just to say that's across Brazil and UK, that's the same with anything.
Take China.
But I just think it's maybe, what's the word I'm looking for, like a greater concentration and finding those points. It's more challenging because of the distance and language. And,
so how important is it, do you feel, and other people can answer this as well, of having those conversations, given that a lot of people I think are very dialogic, it's about talking, it's about, like we've seen it today. How important is it to be together in the room doing that? Does anybody not think it's important?
I think that online and digital is brilliant for keeping connections going. I think there's nothing like being in space with people. Because, when developing this private global city, we went over there and we ran a lab with all the people in the city who might be interested. And we learned so much from that day, just in terms of what people's perceptions of Player City were, the way that people responded to the lab, which was so different to the way that we experienced it in Bristol.
And I think we have to deal with raising expectations. I mean, we've been raising expectations for the last year. And I know that people might be over-expecting a lot about working together and how to cope with that. So I know that the initiatives like BR 116 is something that is also raising these connections and working hard on linking the two countries. This is how it started. But in terms of really more institutional issues, that how much we cope about the high engagement from institutions in Brazil and the UK and its leaders and the curators, artists, and how to cope with this too, in a very positive way, pressure about both sides, and how to really understand the different ways of structuring the arts. In the UK and in Brazil, we don't have a structure at all or a policy. We are building something there. We hope it's a sustainable way of delivering the arts in the next coming years. We don't know. We have a new minister that just in place, she's not from the arts. She's taught very political. But again, who knows if she's staying. So we have to cope with the fact that Brazil has a very specific scenario. We have very successful models of delivering and funding the arts in Brazil through the S systems, for example, SESCs and SENACs and SENAIs, which are very, very successful in terms of pots of money, quality and diverse. I'm not saying it's the ideal model, never is, but it's one of them. We also have a specific tax breaks in Brazil, which is a very delicate, very difficult way of understanding the arts scenario in Brazil. You have federal, state, and municipal ways of applying for funds through tax breaks. So it's three different layers of fundraising in Brazil, and how complex a project can be and can apply for different ways of funding. So this reflects very much on how arts are produced and thought, and really in the creative process. And Jorge is right in raising the fact that artists and producers are institutions. We should deal with that. It's a very intriguing and challenging scenario But it's not very different from what you have here as well.
Yeah, but also, you know, I did a mapping of digital culture in Brazil for the Dutch Ministry of Culture in 2008-2009. They did every art form, they did all the funding structures. It's all written up in English, it's all already there, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's things like Artist Links, which created a lot of artist residencies, all wrote reports. So there's actually material around that I think if there isn't already somewhere, then maybe our 116 can act as a network space to share existing information rather than thinking you always have to start from nowhere. Because although Brazil might be developing, it's now a much studied country, and you know how many delegations.
And I would never say this 10 years ago, but I think never ever Brazil, couldn't be more ready for a connection like we are 116 or Transform or whichever we call it. Brazil is very sophisticated, has really very specific and relevant leaders in the arts and creativity. So I'm sure that the country is a completely new scenario, and this is very promising.
But you said this morning that, you know, from a British Council's point of view, I'm sorry to use that on the political agency, that it's very difficult for you to work with individual artists, and I think we all appreciate that because it's, you know, how many people live in the country, you can't all agree with one person. Therefore, we have institutions, we have, you know, agencies, we have representation. But so therefore, is there more space for something that does link artists, given that there's already lots of institutions that do the culture?
I think what I was trying to say is that at this moment, Transform, we can get proposals from artists directly, but we would rather tend to work through.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate that.
Otherwise, it would be very less, with less potential for us to really.
My question was, does that mean there's more of a gap for artist-to-artist communication?
No, not really. I don't think so. I think we do have ways of bridging artist to artist, but this needs to be connected through big projects or festivals or art centers. I'm not saying that, on the contrary, one of the Transform ambitions is linking artists, but we are not in a situation at this level to say, look, let's put Marx and Joelson in contact to create something for only the two of them. We are not in this level yet. We will.
So
but now, of course, it's one of the missions. But now we are now really creating a platform of, how can I say, big projects. Yes.
I think it's bigger projects that can multiply activities. So the British Council aren't like managing 100 projects, they're managing, I don't know, several projects that they have lots.
Yes. So just to pull them into a little bit, what might the Welsh or Wales version of that be? Because I think there would be, there would be a disappointment, both probably amongst this group of people and in the country as a whole, if the only options for Wales was to be part of initiatives that were based somewhere else in the UK. So it feels as though there should be at least some initiatives, whether they're specific to Wales or whether they are just hobbies here, that are making connections from here to Brazil. I mean, that seems to be the potential that sits in the room. And one of the nice things that I think in the room that we should stick with is that there are people at different groups coming up in their artistic lives, maybe, and maybe there's something to treasure about that. And maybe there's also something about all the things that people mentioned today about exploring links through practical, artistic, participative things that we could actually not put on hold now for 2 years and come back to after we've done a big project that we continue to use.
Yeah.
So what might be the hubs or the ways that versions of this group of people or versions of this place could link with Brazil? What are the steps? Because it's easy to say, well, it should be a link with the whole state in Brazil, but how do we know?
But would Wales want to do that? It's
Yeah.
like,
And in a way, yeah, Andy and I could each go off and meeting with plan a couple of projects.
okay, that's one option.
But that's fairly straightforward. But it feels like there's something better than that.
What might that be? Thoughts?
No, I was going to say, maybe there needs to be a conversation, because I know that there's some organisations not represented here. Is there a conversation to be had as well within Wales about what some of those groups?
Yeah, there definitely is, yeah.
Yeah, is there a platform that we can have that conversation, that broader conversation, and before presenting what we want.
How much do we work with associated artists that really work with specific initiatives? Because what we've been hearing from most of the art proposals would be that the artists will be, of course, they are the kings of a project always. But what I say is that they are being commissioned by specific proponents who are applying for the proposal. So my view would be how much you would be able to commission or involve or work with associated artists with you. That's maybe rephrasing what I was trying to say.
What does associated artists mean? Freelance artists?
Doesn't
Or
matter.
artists that are
Methods
associated
for
with
who are leading specific.
I just don't understand what you mean by associated artists, sorry.
I know that Watershed works some along the Barbican or South Bank Center or any other.
So as artists who are represented by an organization.
Yes,
Right.
that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that we are not working with artists directly, but through specific
Yeah, no,
channels.
that's what I think we. I appreciate the idea of your organization, and it does make sense. But what I feel is that it could be so much easier. It would be so much smaller, but it would be a start. I mean, me as an starting artist or whatever I am, I could just, why can't I talk to someone in Brazil who does the same thing and say how you feel, and then let's put something together and let's show you the new report. Let's show at the same time.
If you don't need the intermediary as a mega structure, let's say, what is it that you feel you need?
I just need a way to get in contact with this person in Brazil.
And is that information or is there tools?
Do you know what would be really good is like with the speed dating today, but doing like a webcam speed dating where you set up a Skype conversation where actually you get a room full of artists or whatever and you set this thing up and you just get
You sit in front of a
2 minutes of just talking to someone on the other side.
There was a funny thing is that was going to happen at lunchtime. It's kind of
It's the same.
we ran out of time.
But I think what I'm saying that, and especially my perspective, is more quite aligned with what Christian is saying, which is that there are two approaches. One's a very top down, from the top coming down, approach, and really how I have entered. And my angle of work is very much coming from exactly as you said, that there were two artists that came together. And that's what happened. Two artists across the Atlantic came together. Georges invited me to this actually before we became a couple. We were a couple. But before we were a couple, we were two collaborating artists. And he invited me to Brazil, and I'd seen his work in the UK, etc., etc. And I think that's coming from the bottom up, you know what I mean? So instead of coming from the sort of, and actually in the beginning we were very keen to make connections with British Council like that. Do you remember those stages?
Quite unsuccessful.
It wasn't me, no, it wasn't you.
Not personally.
So there was a lot of kind of, we were kind of a little bit frustrated perhaps, and then in the end, and I think that is about you know what, let's just do it for ourselves. And we just did it for ourselves and continue to do it for ourselves, quite unsupported and quite independent. But now I see that there is such a hunger for those kinds of things to continue happening that I'm very excited to be creating an agency. And I've heard a lot of people say Zuccarello Theatre today, and I just want to state for the record that it is not Zuccarello Theatre anymore. Okay, so it has
live on web.
Live on web.
You should write it down.
But it's just dropping the theatre.
That's yeah.
Just
we're thinking.
It's not a new name.
It could be.
Remember that.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, I can spell it.
All these terms.
Look, I would like just to raise the fact that Transform is not only channel for
Absolutely.
and we were not
I was just about to say.
I really don't feel comfortable about your guys having the perception that you can work with us. That's not true. That's really not true. Transform is very much about an arts program connecting artists, curator, leaders, cultural institutions. So that's very much this.
There's many different roads.
Yes, of course. And I'm coming back to Christina, what she said about talking to an artist there. Of course. And we very much welcome this, and this is why we're doing that. So perhaps what I'm trying to say that we, at this moment, we are not ready for direct approaches from artists, but we will very soon.
But they don't have to come through British
No,
Council.
of course not.
I think
They're
that's
not
kind
very
of
channel.
And it can end up there. I mean, as you two started, and then eventually it ends up bringing in other.
So is this,
Yeah.
but is this a place to where Zuccarello could be providing some more networking space?
So I think around BR116, what BR116 shape would be most useful. One that would retain our initial desire, because there's a level of capacity, as in Bron is very rightly raised. How can a small independent arts organization which manage to sort of do it for ourselves, then suddenly go, all right, we'll do it for everyone? Of course, we don't have the capacity for that. So what can we retain from our impulse and our knowledge and understanding, and be able to make it a bit more available? And then what's the best medium to do that? And then there's the meetings. There is one medium we're exploring on format. There's something that we're expanding online. There's something that is about residencies and whether they intersect with the R16. And these are what we're most keen to hear, because then it's about, right, so because we don't have capacity to do the 5 things, for now we'll do this one. And we'll really invest our time and thought and collaboration in making that.
The fascinating thing about this, and one of the reasons I was interested in coming down, is that it's also another model which you have, working with John, working with Abdul, who are in themselves a kind of agencies. It's been really interesting being here for the last 2 days and hearing how they work. With no venue, and very much with this kind of, it's not top down. It's actually it's the lateral effect, and really good arts organisations these days who are part of infrastructure work like that. And I'm running many different platforms. I put Watershed into that sort of level as well, and that sort of model as well, which is almost fit for its context. It's in a place, and it's modelled on that place, but it's also not just off that place. It's not inward looking. It's setting on trajectories. And then the question that's really interesting for me is how in that ecology, an artist-led initiative, which is very much about making work. At the end of the day, that's what you want to do, and that's what you do brilliantly. Can somehow, work together. What are the ways in which these organisations that are working naturally, that are maybe funded and they've got some stability, at least for a few years, can also grow that ecology and that relationship with artists, and the arts residency, the lab, the different kinds of open processes are really important in that. And then you try and do that even between different parts of the UK. And then there's the, how would you also do that with Brazil challenge? But hey, it's an interesting question.
There's a couple of things just to put on the table that might be useful to people. One is that we will be trialling, as of January, an online artist collaboration space. It'll be very much in the sort of beta stages. But one of the things about it, bearing in mind that language is an issue between the UK and Brazil, is that it uses different online tools, including visual tools, to try and help people collaborate at a distance. So even maybe what you guys could help us with might be, or where we help each other, is locating from your networks and maybe some other networks around the room, artists in Brazil who might be interested in joining that network, and then making sure that there's a range of artists, including Paulina, Christina, Brent, etc., on that from the UK side. I imagine there's a bunch of artists from the China side who might be interested. And maybe just helping, what some of us could do is help tweak some of those relationships, because there will be a site where people can sort of register as artists and look for people to collaborate with. So that might be quite an easy, no-cost space to start help making some of. What I imagine is it will involve a little bit of hand-holding and go, I think you, artist in Rio that I know, might be really interested in having a chat online to this German Welsh woman.
The other point I would like to add is that we on the occasion of the launches of Transform, we also launched the website of Transform, which is on. And we would like very much that this is also a tool for connection. So the more you use it, the more we are able also to
Can you register on that as a person? Or?
That's what we are trying to offer. I'm not sure if this is already in place, so if you can help us in making your suggestions as well, because this would be very much a platform of an online collaboration and a forum for discussion as well. This is
we have
what
we have about 3-4 minutes left. We do not.
You say that because it sounds a bit stupid, but I guess we glazed over it. National Theatre Wales does already have the community page, so if there was a way of getting people in Brazil on there already, there is a way of getting that communication started now without having to wait for this other website to come through, which is more like that. There is a looser network there.
We didn't look, did we, at a projection of Arts Theatre Wales today, nationally? We could have it. Because I haven't got it.
It's just an online social network. 4,000 people on it.
The language thing can
Yeah, but I think that would be
Comment is like Facebook or
so we can start a group on today.
you know, people can comment and blogs and respond.
I can do that.
Yeah. So if you give us the credentials, we'll invite everybody to that. That's a starting point. In terms of the 2 minutes,
yeah.
In terms of taking in terms of some big projects happen or some initiatives.
I think the idea, if I remember, the idea was it was suggested that this was a catalyst, because sometimes things come slightly outside and they say, oh wow, we should do this in Wales. So it sounds like an easy win to get the various agencies around the table who can make some of these happen, whether or not they come through one route or another. It's about the plural development strategy, and it seems to me that seems to be a really logical thing to do out of this.
So, Dan, would you work with us to get together a meeting that we do on today, Louise at the Arts Council, to talk about, and if we can bring some kind of write-up of some of these ideas as a stimulus to what might otherwise be a slightly less guerrilla dancing meeting than what we have today.
But do you mean then compiling and bringing the using the highlights and into a single document that we could share? Yeah, this is so useful.
Yeah, that seems like the right point to say. Good decision.
We'll make a group, so we'll just go to scroll down, scroll to the top of the page there. So there's groups. So inside groups by Monday there will be a group called What should we call
What
it?
should we call it? Yeah.
Should we be really honest and just call it Wales Brazil? Is that, so we call it BR160 outside, we've got no clue what it
Wales
is.
is Brazil. Wales to Brazil.
Wales to Brazil, Brazil to Wales.
It's about Wales.
Some Brazilian Walesy name we will here.
With Wales.
If you just go to, we don't need to email or anything, just go to that site, it's community.nationaltheatrewales.org, or just go to nationaltheatrewales.org and hit community and join that group. So
You
if
have to have a profile,
It's
yeah.
not really congratulating on your website, it's actually really congratulating.
You would like to go first meeting?
But you do need to create a profile on there, that's the only thing.
Do you have to live in Wales?
No, it's not from all over the world.
You used to create like it's such Facebook.
You come on the screen and do it.
But let's not say, oh, we'll all email everyone with a link or an invite, etc. Because we're all here, that's let's join it, and then as Monday approaches, we'll get a group up.
You will want to wait, you will have to wait to be approved as well. So I get scared. It's how you say
Super, that's just to stop Olga from Russia. That's for a very special
But I was saying, if you put on Friday, you probably be approved on Monday. No one knows. Yeah, but we'll try, we could probably approve this.
Can I take this opportunity then to thank Rhonda very much?
Yeah.
Taking on the task. Yeah, the task. Yeah. Keep going. And to say we'll have a couple of minutes just to set the space up, and then we'll have Carolina's last commission.